Our speaker tonight is a master in the advanced art of failure. In his early teens, he failed to win the vote of class president in a class of only 25 students. In his late teens, he failed to complete college, dropping out after only 2 years. In his early 20s, he failed in business twice. In his 30s, he failed to complete the Los Angeles Marathon, dropping out after only 3 miles. That sounds a little familiar. In his 40s, he failed as a wannabe real estate investor, losing everything he had, including the family home. In his 50s, he lost the 6th and final spot to compete for Team USA in the International 24-Hour Ultra Marathon competition by mere seconds. And now in his early 60s, he is the losingest 100-mile runner in the world. You're still here? With a speech titled, Your Extraordinary Gift. Please help me welcome you to Toastmasters at Speakers Bureau, our accredited speaker, and his each title, Your Extraordinary Gift.
At some point, you have to ask yourself, do you feel lucky? Well, do you, punk? All right, fellow Toastmasters, Tom, and any guests that we have, I apologize first off for not being PC, smoking a cigar, and calling you a punk. But I believe in PC, in a different kind of PC. The PC I like to call positive coincidence, or as my grandma used to call it, a coinky-dink. Now, you might think of it as maybe being at the right place at the right time, or having the lucky stars line up, or even it's referred to as happy accidents. Well, I believe there are things, events that occur in our lives. We're in a certain place at a certain time, and if we can have a different mindset, and maybe it could be looked at as negative, but we change the way we process that event, it could turn out to be positive. I'm going to spend some time with you. I'm going to be walking and talking and sharing with you my story, mostly about walking and talking. So I have a question for all of you. Who taught you how to walk and talk? If you had to name someone, could you name the individual or individuals who taught you to walk? Let's your hands. If you could name those who taught you how to walk and talk. I see many hands that did not go up. You don't know who taught you how to walk and talk? Okay, well, that's okay, because I don't know. I was placed in foster care at the age of 7 months, and I was bounced from home to home to home, and finally went to a home when I was 3.5 that eventually adopted me. I have no idea who taught me how to walk and talk. And as I thought about it, I really started to think, do we really need someone to teach something so simple as walking? It just seems to come natural to us. And talking, if we're around other people, we can hear what they're saying and start to mimic them. So I don't really know that an individual specifically taught me to walk and talk, but my life has become all about walking and talking. Now, I had a dream. And how many of you have had a dream as a child? You just wanted it so badly. When you went to sleep at night, you could feel it, you could taste it. You woke up in the morning, it was the first thought that came to your mind. Did you have that kind of dream? I had that dream. I got a Christmas present, a Guinness World Record book. And I leafed through the pages and all these amazing world records. And that was my dream, to get in the Guinness Book of World Records. And then when I was 12, there was the Olympics, the 1972 Olympics. Mark Spitz was a swimmer. And if you are from that period of time, you know that he set a world record. He won 7 gold medals in swimming. And then 4 years later, 1976, my hero, Bruce Jenner, I wanted to grow up and be just like Bruce Jenner. Will not become Caitlyn Jenner, but I think you get what I'm talking about. I wanted to be an athlete, a world recognized athlete. But here's the problem that I had. I didn't have the skill set Bruce Jenner had. He mastered 10 different sports, the decathlon. I didn't have upper body strength. I could barely put one foot in front of the other without tripping over my own two big feet. So I really had to give up that dream. But I started dreaming about maybe I could run a marathon. And then I learned about this guy named Boston Billy. Boston Billy won the Boston Marathon year after year after year. Boston Billy was my new hero. I want to grow up to be just like him. And so when I was 17, I trained every day, went out running. A friend of mine also, the school I went to, the high school, we went out running together. We trained to run a marathon. And our senior year, we both ran a marathon together. We didn't finish together, but when we finished, we took this picture. Now I'm the handsome shirtless guy that is skinny and has hair on the top of his head. That was the good old days. This is my very first marathon I ran in 1980 at the age of 17. And it was a pretty fast marathon. It was a 3-hour, 2-minute marathon. Not so bad for my first time out. Now, I only had to shave about an hour off to become Olympic level, but there was time. I was only 17. So a month later, I ran another marathon. And that was 2 marathons at the age of 17. When I was 18, I ran 3 marathons. I was getting faster and faster. I was on my way to being that Olympic marathon runner, world record holder. And then I got distracted by the opposite sex. Now, I'm not going to blame a certain person in this room, but when I was 19, I was really no longer interested in pursuing that goal. I had a whole new goal to pursue. And I am proud to say that in July, we'll celebrate 43 years of marriage. So as life went on and I started a business, we started having children, at some point I had this nagging thought that I wanted to go back and run a marathon again. And so in my early 30s, I decided this was the time, the 1994 Los Angeles Marathon. Signed up for the marathon, but I was busy, work every day, the kids, 4 kids at that point, and I just never seemed to have time to go out and train. No worries. I had done 5 marathons when I was a teenager. I mean, I could knock this thing out of my sleep. But as we got closer and closer to marathon day, I started getting a little concerned because maybe I should do a little bit of running. So I started to go out and run a little. And then I decided, well, you've got to do some of those long runs, as Bond had shared with us. So I did a couple long runs and I wasn't prepared for it. And my knees were really not ready for that. Well, I had the marathon. I signed up for it. I paid good money, so I showed up. The marathon starter gun went off. Actually, it was a countdown. It was Muhammad Ali counting down. And as soon as he got to 1, we were off and running. Running that first mile. Not a problem. I was going pretty quick, about a 7-minute mile. Running that second mile. Getting warmed up, still at a 7-minute mile, but my knees were starting to hurt a little bit. And then that 3rd mile, man, my knees were really aching. And I had to start doing maybe a little bit of walking, and then I could run a little bit, and then some walking, and then some running. And it wasn't far past mile 3 that I knew I couldn't complete the marathon. 26.2 miles, as Bond shared with us. I was only 3 miles in. And so I stopped. Now, you might go your whole life and meet people who run marathons. About 1 in every 200 Americans will run a marathon. The finish rate in most marathons is around it's around 90, 1 to 2% would be terrible. It's around 98, 99%, which means 1 to 2% do not finish. But I bet you can go your whole life and you will never find another person who stopped running a marathon at mile 3. And that was me. So that was it. Yeah, my marathon dreams were over. And I talked to someone, it was a few days after this had happened, and I was telling him about the situation and how miserable I was, because imagine that you're in this race and you stop. Well, you have to still get back to your car. And that was 3 miles back at the start line. And now I'm walking and there's thousands and thousands of people. They're still going that direction towards the finish line. And I'm going back to my car. That was one of the most humiliating experiences of my life. Got back to my car, went home. And as I was saying, I met a gentleman a few days after that. And we were talking about this event. And he said, you know, Ed, it might be that all those marathons you did as a kid, maybe you ruined your knees. You know, you ran on the street, a lot of hard miles. And I thought about that. And I thought, you know what? He's probably right. And that little thought went to my little mind and germinated. So the point eventually where I decided I would never run a marathon again in my life. I ruined my knees. That dream was over. Now, sadly, to this day, I can't remember who that person was. I don't know if it was another marathon runner. I don't know if it was a coach, someone in the medical field. I have no idea. But his message to me was powerful enough that it stuck with me, and I was never going to run again. 2 years later, I decided I was going to be a real estate mogul. And I started learning about real estate investing, getting all the information that I could. I went to seminars, read books, and I decided this is something that I could do. And so the real estate market was fertile. And anyone who wanted to invest, all you had to do is be able to fog up a mirror and they'd give you money. That was easy. So I started buying some properties. Now, the properties that I bought were properties that were fixer-uppers. You put some effort into them, you fix them up, they appreciate in value, some sweat equity, and you sell for profit. And you go and you do it again. It all made sense. I was on my way. And this is in 2007. Now, if you know about the real estate market around that time, 2007, 2008, what happened to that market that was just taking off like a rocket? It came down with a crash. Unfortunately for me, my house of cards was built on speculation and everything collapsed. All of my properties that I had, I ended up losing. Now, that's not so bad. That's what happens sometimes when you take risks. But if you take a risk on your own personal assets, and you take a risk by taking all the money out of the equity in your own personal home, that is not smart. Now, eventually I had to tell my wife that all the investments that we made, we lost them, and she was aware of that. I buried my head in the sand. I didn't want to deal with it, but I had to. But the worst experience that I had was when there was a knock on the front door. And there was the sheriff's officer with a default notice. We were losing our home. Now, my job as a husband, as a father, is to provide for my family, to be the protector, to provide a roof over their head. It wouldn't have been so bad if my children were all younger, because we could move to their house and we could say, hey guys, we're going to move. It's going to be fun. But my kids were teenagers and they were a little bit too smart to have dad pull the wool over their eyes. So I had to have a serious conversation with them, and I had to tell them that dad had messed up really badly. And of course, we did lose our home. Now, it wouldn't have maybe happened if I'd have kept working as much as I should have, but because I was in such a state of depression, I wasn't working, our business suffered, and everything just seemed to fall apart. It got to a point to where I thought the best thing I could do for my family was to check out. See, I had over $2 million of life insurance, and if I somehow just maybe was going too fast around the Ortega Highway, one of the corners, and just kind of went off the edge, No one would be the wiser. My wife would get that insurance money. She could save the home, continue to live the lifestyle she was used to. The kids would all be fine. Luckily, someone saw that that was not the best way to go. And of course, that would be my lovely bride. She knew I was having difficulties. I didn't share with her how bad. I didn't share with her my suicidal ideations, but she knew that I needed to get some attention, some medical help. And so she got me to go see a psychiatrist. Remember I talked about earlier, those happy accidents, those positive coincidences, being at the right place at the right time. Happened to be the psychiatrist that I saw was a marathon runner. Actually, he had ran the Boston Marathon a few times. And when we started to talk and I told him my story, he understood where I was coming from and understood my passion for running that I used to have. And he encouraged me, go back out and start running again, Ed. I said, well, Dr. Murphy, I can't. My knees are ruined. I ruined them years ago. I can't run anymore. He said, well, Ed, then go out and walk. Now, let me tell you about walking. I grew up in a time, 1980s, when running a marathon meant running a marathon. If you walked, even a few steps, how dare you call yourself a marathon runner? Go home. You see, that's the mentality back in those days. In fact, to run the Boston Marathon, you had, as a male, you had to qualify with the 2-hour, 50-minute marathon. That was it, across the board, 2 hours and 50 minutes. And of course, to do that, you'd have to run every step of the way. So I was not really keen to the idea of walking, but the doctor suggested, Bill, Ed, you really need to go out and do some walking. I'm going to give you some medication that you need. And I want you to do meditation also. You need to exercise every day. And why don't you go out and start walking? So I did. Went out and started to walk around the neighborhood. Not so bad. After walking a few weeks, I decided, well, maybe I could run a few steps and walk. Did that. Wasn't so bad. And then I started running a few more steps and eventually got to where I could run the whole time I was out and was able to run a couple of miles. I came home and talked to my lovely bride. I said, honey, I think I can run a marathon. Now, concerned for me and what I'd gone through, she said, well, remember what happened last time? I said, yeah, I know, but I didn't train last time. And I think if I train properly, I can actually complete it. Now, I need to go back just a little bit. There was a time when our family decided we would do a marathon, and we walked it. Now, did that count as a marathon? No, not in my mind, but it actually did count. In fact, it was a great experience. I actually got to cross the finish line with my two middle children. This is 8-year-old Andrea, 9-year-old Ethan. You can see by the date here, it's 2000. And you might think, well, Ed, there you go. You did a marathon. That's the finish line, by the way. You can see the clock, just a little portion of it, 8 hours and 45 minutes. Again, we walked the whole thing. But it was a marathon. We got finishers' medals. But in my mind, that didn't count. That's not marathons. You run marathons. But 6 years later, after that, started doing the investing and things fell apart. And then in 2009, I decided, well, why not try it again? And I did, and I completed the marathon. And then I started running more marathons. And I found that, hey, I like this. This is actually pretty fun. But then there was that goal that I had. Remember the goal I had? I wanted to be in the Olympics. I wanted to set a world record. Well, now I'm in my mid-40s. That's just no way possible. But at least I could run and enjoy the sport. I started running more and more marathons. A year later, my daughter, after I started running marathons, my daughter wanted to do a marathon with me, this daughter. And by the way, she was 8 years old. And there were people who said, that's just wrong. You forced a little 8-year-old girl and a little 9-year-old boy, you forced them to go run a marathon. No, I didn't force him. We joined a program called the Lowman and the Lopers, and it was a 7-month training program that we went through. So we were prepared when we showed up. But people had said things to me that weren't so nice. And I remember hearing a comment that, you know, what kind of dad are you? You probably just ruined your poor daughter's growth plates. You know, and it's really sad that I did, because She wanted to do the marathon with me 10 years after this, just to sort of celebrate the 10 years. And well, the poor thing, she only grew to be 5'11". Now, you might notice from this, she said, Dad, I want to go to the LA Marathon again. It's been 10 years since I did it with you when I was 9, and Ethan had an injury, so he couldn't do it. And I said, well, yeah, that'd be great, except for I'm not able to run. I'd actually gotten an injury, it was a tibia stress fracture, and I was in a walking boot. And she said, well, if you want to walk it, I'll walk it with you. And I said, well, I think maybe I can walk it in maybe around 6 hours, I think. And she said, sure, why not? Let's do it. So we did. Now, when we went to get our, it's called the bib, race bib. It's a number that you wear. This happened to be in 2010. This is her senior year graduating. And out of over 20,000 entrants in the marathon, randomly, guess what number she got? Well, you can see it on her shorts, 2010. And I got, of course, 2011. So we felt this is fate. We need to do this. And we did the marathon. We're at the finish with our finishers' medals in that boot. Well, once I did the marathon in that boot, and by the way, the shirt says Marathon Maniac. There's a club of people who are insane about running marathons. I joined that club. Once I ran the marathon in the boot, I thought, well, I can do more marathons in the boot. And I started doing more, just walking them. Now, remember, there was a time when walking, for me, was wrong in a marathon. You just couldn't do that. But I started walking them and found out that, it's still a fun event. It's still challenging, and it still counts. I looked. The medal they give you, it doesn't say walk marathon. It just says marathon. And I met someone in one of my marathon walks, and he had convinced me that I should start doing 100-mile races. And so I did. I did 100-mile race. Actually, before I'd gotten injured, but a year later, I had this injury, and I thought, well, maybe I can walk 100 miles in the boot. And so it was 1 year after I had ran my first 100-mile race, I was walking my first 100-mile race. And you can see that trusty boot. Well, there I am out on the course, and this is in Riverside, Vaughn. This is a horse facility called Sexton Ranch. You can see the orange grows in the background. And by the time the 24 hours were up, I had actually completed 102 miles. Still in the boot. Now, when you run a 100-mile race, they give you a belt buckle. Unfortunately, this race didn't have belt buckles, so we got this little plastic goat on a lanyard. But hey, to me, it was good enough. Well, now, for me, this is almost going full circle. At one point, running marathons was all that really mattered. Walking them didn't count. And I had just completed 100 miles, 102 miles in under 24 hours and walked the whole way. So I knew I had a new sport I could do. I could walk and run marathons and 100-mile races. I started running more 100-mile races once I got the boot off and ran more and more. In fact, in 2010, 2011, I actually was attempting to break a world record. Now, I wasn't going to run the fastest marathon. That was just out of the question. But I met someone named Yolanda Holder who held the world record with a guy from, Yolanda's from Corona, and there's a guy from Texas, Larry Macon. They had both, each separately, ran and walked 106 marathons in one single year. Well, I thought, I can maybe do that. And it's a world record. Maybe I can complete that. So I started running every marathon I could, every weekend, doing 2 marathons, sometimes 3 marathons. And I also was doing ultra marathons. So I knew that I could show up at an ultra and do a marathon distance and then get a different bib number and do another marathon distance. And I could add them up that way. So at the end of 2011, I ran a race that's very iconic. It's called the Badwater 135. Now, Badwater 135 is only 135 miles, and it's only going to this place that few people heard about called Death Valley. And it's only done in the middle of July on purpose to be the hottest time of the year. In fact, it's called the toughest foot race on the planet. And that was my finish of a 1-year goal of running as many marathons and ultra marathons as I could. And it was number 135, a world record. I'd finally done it. I had my world record. Now, there's a little problem with world records and Guinness. You see, Guinness has these really detailed rules that you have to follow. One being that if you're doing an event that has multiple parts to it, like 135 different races, you have to get every single race notarized, and you have to have an official from the local town sign that you've done that. I would need to do that 135 times. And I didn't. So people asking, well, was it a Guinness World Record? No, it wasn't Guinness. No, it wasn't a Guinness World Record. But after that, I started running more 100-mile races. And I found that there was something that you could do called the most 100-mile races in a year. Someone had done that. And so I decided to do that. And in 2014, I set out and ran 41 in 1 year. It was a new world record. Now, after that, I thought, I've experienced quite a few things. I've had some good races, and I think I have a story that I could share. And I'd like to start speaking more. Now, I had joined this little organization back in 1989 when I was in my late 20s. A little club called the Toastmasters. And as Rod had mentioned, and I'll paraphrase a bit, but when you've got everything you can from Toastmasters, it's okay to leave. That's not what she said, but I'm just using some Ed interpretation of that. And so after a year of being in Toastmasters, I had everything that I could get from Toastmasters. There was nothing more they could teach me. And I went on my way and did other things. But in 2015, I thought, that Toastmasters group, they taught me some good things about speaking, and maybe I could go back and learn a few more things. So I joined Toastmasters in 2015. And in 2016, I had the opportunity to compete in an international speech contest. Well, I like to compete in running, so I thought, why not compete as a speaker? And so I did in 2016. And when I competed in my local club, great speech, and I landed that speech in 7 minutes and 37 seconds. Now, if you know about the speech contest, it's 5 to 7 minutes with a 30-second grace period either end. That means 7:37 is 7 seconds over. The club that I was in was a new club, and they didn't realize that you don't even have to have a speech contest. If there's no one that wants to compete, the club can just assign it to an individual. Well, no one wanted to compete, but they decided, well, I wanted to be in the contest. So we have to put a contest on because we have one person. And so my club and I thought that was it. But then I talked to someone who was quite active in the Toastmasters in the speech contest arena, Cindy Carpenter. And she said, Ed, you can just join another club, find another club that maybe doesn't have a speaker for the contest. They're not putting him forward, and see if they'll let you represent them. I found a club, and they said, yeah, come on. Fantastic Communicators, the name of that club. They said, we'd love to have you represent us. So I represented them and went to my speech contest. I gave a great speech. I made it through the area contest, went to the division contest, gave a great speech, and I got second place. I was beat by a scorpion named Sting. Now, those of you who may have been in that at that contest in 2016, you maybe don't even remember the story of the scorpion named Sting. Well, I remember it because it stung when I didn't win that division contest. That's all right. Every year they have a new contest. So 2017, I entered the contest. Now, there's an interesting thing that happened between 2016 and 2017. I was getting more and more involved in a part of Toastmasters called Speakers Bureau. And I learned that they have a designation called, what is it called? Qualified speaker. And I learned that if you attended 5 meetings and you completed your competent communicator's manual, back then we had those, that you could actually apply and get up and speak and become a qualified speaker. And I did that in 2016. It was November of 2016, right here on this very stage. And I made a sort of a challenge to everybody in the room about running a marathon. I said, if you want to complete a marathon, if you come see me at the end of this speech, I will coach you for free. At this point, I was actually getting paid to coach. I will coach you for free. And I had a few people that saw me at the end and wanted to take me up on that. Karen Lucas was one of them. She might even be, she's very active on Speakers Bureau. I don't know if she's here with us today, but she was one of them. So I coached these individuals. And our marathon was the 2017 Los Angeles Marathon. One of the women that I coached, who was a Toastmaster, was, oh, let me see if I can find a picture. I think I've got it. There it is. Okay. This woman right here, and she recruited her friend. This is the finish line of the marathon. Now you might be wondering, well, Ed, I see those 2 women. I don't see you. I see Darth Vader there in the middle. Well, that was actually me. You see, she challenged me. They had the Guinness World Record people there to verify world records, and she was going to run as a character from the play Hamilton. And she challenged me. She said, Ed, why don't you run and get a world record? Run as a character. So I thought, well, how about if I run as the jester? Because that's what I do. I run as a jester. I have a jester hat and a court jester outfit. But I looked up the records in Guinness and found out that there was a guy who had ran as a jester, and he had the world record for the fastest marathon as a jester, and it was under 3 hours. That was out. I was not going to be able to compete against that. So I thought, well, what else could I do? Well, you know, there's the Joker card, and that's sort of like a jester. So I got this Joker card outfit. With Guinness, you submit your goal, your world record goal, and they have individuals that will look at it and decide whether it's worthy of a Guinness World Record. They got back to me and they said, no, we don't think running as the Joker really is something that we would give a Guinness World Record to. But the person who sent me the email said, why don't you run as a character from Star Wars? Okay, that makes sense. She said, we've never had anybody run as a character from Star Wars. And as long as you can do it in under 5 hours, you can get a Guinness World Record. There's my opportunity to get in the Guinness World Record books. So I went to Party City. Now you have to realize that this is in February, so Party City is really bare bones at that point. And I thought, well, let's see. I could see if I can find a Han Solo costume, or maybe a Luke Skywalker, or maybe one of the Stormtroopers. They had only one Star Wars character costume, and that was Darth Vader. Now here's one of the rules with Guinness. If you're going to run in a costume, you have to be in the costume the whole 26.2 miles. Now, what I didn't know when I got this costume is, especially with this face mask, that it was hot. And a couple of times I got so warm that I actually needed to remove it and cool myself down. But if I did it on the course, certainly, if someone saw me that was an official, or if they took a photo of me, I'd be disqualified. So I actually had to go off course, take it off, pour some oil on my head, cool down a little bit, and then get back on course and then continue running. And I still had to do it all within 5 hours. I did. I got it done within 5 hours. And by the way, I had sent them a picture of my Darth Vader costume, and they said, "Yep, that'll work." So I was on my way. Now, when I sent them the picture and I said, "All right, guys, I'm ready. I want to get my Guinness World Record." They sent me back an email. They said, "No, we're looking at your shoes, and those aren't Darth Vader shoes." Now, the sponsor of this race, one of the main sponsors, was Skechers. These were actually a pair of Skechers shoes. They were black. They weren't running shoes. And there's no way I could find Darth Vader boots. They didn't sell them. And so I got disqualified. I did not get my Guinness World Record. But I had a good story. So the contest was just a few weeks later. I actually qualified for my club. This is early 2017, March of 2017. So I was going to the area contest and I decided I'm going to change my speech. I'm going to go as Darth Vader. I did. I went as Darth Vader, had my mask on and my outfit. When I came out, sort of like the Clint Eastwood, "Luke, I am your father." And then went on to talk about the event and with the group of people that I had coached, and I took off the outfit. It was a good speech. It was on time. I knew I had it in the bag. Now, there are 5 speakers that spoke in that contest. One young lady, bless her heart, she froze. She wasn't able to get through her speech very well. So we knew that she was not really in competition. And then so that was 4 people that were left. And so, as you know, if you've done a contest or seen one, that they announced the top 3. They announced 3rd place. They didn't announce my name for 3rd place. You know what that meant? I'm getting 1st or 2nd place. They announced 2nd place. It was not my name. You know what that meant? I won that contest. And they announced Edwin Ettinghausen. Well, that's what I heard, but they didn't announce Edwin Ettinghausen. They announced a woman that beat me with the story about being behind the curtains of a play. She won. I lost. I didn't even get 2nd or 3rd place. After the contest, there were people that were going congratulating those who had placed, and they even congratulated the poor young lady who kind of froze. But I didn't get any congratulations, and I'm just sort of licking my wounds and not very happy with myself. And I did remember, though, that the contest chairperson was a woman named Margaret Hope, which wasn't really significant, except for on her name tag, there were 2 letters, AS. Now, I'd heard about AS, accredited speaker. I never met one. District 12 didn't have an accredited speaker. Cheryl Roush would sometimes visit District 12. Other people would visit District 12. And in fact, Dr. Hope she was from Canada. She was a professor that was a snowbird down for the period of time there. And so I talked to her afterwards and I said, "Wow, I'm really impressed. I've never been able to meet an accredited speaker. Someday, I'd love to be able to become an accredited speaker. And I can't now, but someday that'd be a cool thing. I'd love to have that." And she said, "Well, Ed, do you speak?" I said, I do. Do you speak for a living?" I do. I actually do CPR seminars." She said, "How long are your seminars?" I said, "They're about an hour and a half." "And they pay you?" "And they pay you how?" "Well, I teach for my specialty is medical and dental offices, and I teach the class. They give me a check when I'm done." So, "Well, that means you're a paid speaker. All right. Have you done at least 15 of those in the last 3 years?" "I do 15 a month." "All right, Ed, is there at least 20 people in your class?" "Well, not all of them, but definitely over 15 in 3 years." "And is this outside of Toastmasters? Because you can't be speaking to Toastmasters groups that won't qualify." I said, "Yeah, it's outside Toastmasters." She said, "Ed, you qualify. You should apply to become an accredited speaker." And so the next year, I did apply. And I went through the whole process and I showed up in Chicago, ready to give my speech. Now we can go back to the contest, 2018. I was doing that speech contest, and I just ran a 48-hour race. I had done quite well at that race, actually. And the next day, I went to the contest and I lost. I gave a good speech, but it wasn't fair. I'll tell you why it wasn't fair. That guy who beat me got up there, tall, built like an Adonis, a full head of hair, and gave a great speech. That guy's name was Rich Poetisky. All right, talk about him a little bit more later. So I lost the contest, but I did go to the accredited speakers event, and I met for the dress rehearsal Thursday night. And they talked about our speech length, and I told Cheryl Roush, who was one of the sponsors of the event, I said, I've got my speech. It's a 22-minute speech because we had to give it a condensed speech. She said, Ed, that's too long. I said, no, I've watched some of the videos of other accredited speakers, and then they're like 20 minutes or more. She said, Ed, what time did they tell you your speech was supposed to be? 16 minutes. She said, Ed, are you a professional speaker? Yeah. Well, then shouldn't you come in on time? They're not going to disqualify you. It's not a timed event, but they're going to be watching their watches. And if you take that much time, I'm not sure you're going to get the accredited speaker. So that night, I stayed up all night. Now, Martha and I were blessed because Tom and Connie had a large room and they had an extra queen size bed, and the hotel rooms there at the convention center were expensive. So we have the benefit of they allowed us to stay in their room. I did not sleep in my bed that night, the whole night. I went out to a hallway and started working on my speech, trying to get it down from 22. Then I got it down to 20, to 19, to 18. I finally got all the way down to 16 minutes. So I was ready. Now, at this event, there were 5 different people that were attempting to become accredited speakers. At that point, there were 75 accredited speakers throughout the world. It's not that many, considering how long Toastmasters has been around and how many people have been Toastmasters. So it was my turn. I gave my speech, and I thought it was a pretty good speech. And then we had to wait. Similar to bond, you have to wait till tomorrow to find out the results. We had to wait till the next day, and they called us in one at a time and talked to us and told us whether or not we had made the qualification, because we had other accredited speakers who were voting for us. And I got it. And they awarded me with one of these special pins here. I think I've got it. Oh, there it is right there. There are now 95 people. So since 2018, there have been 20 more people who have gotten the accredited speaker pin. 2 people are going to be going to the Philadelphia convention and attempting to become accredited speakers. So I became an accredited speaker. And I learned something about an accredited speaker designation. There are only 2 designations that you can get where, well, let me back up a little bit. There's one designation you can get that can be removed from you if you don't conduct yourself properly as a Toastmaster, and that is accredited speaker. So I have to be careful what I do and what I say, because I don't need someone to send into Toastmasters International, oh, that Ed Ettinghausen, I think you should pull his accredited speaker designation away. I don't think he's quite living up to our standards. So I'm always on my best behavior at Toastmasters. Outside of Toastmasters, it's a different story, but in Toastmasters. But there's also something that can happen in Toastmasters where you can be disqualified. You could be banned from ever competing again. It can happen. Now, I'm hoping it's going to happen, because this year I did the contest, the speech contest. I went to the area contest. I gave a great speech. I knew it was a first place speech. But guess who was also speaking that day? Rich Politiski. And sure enough, they announced second place. That was me, and Rich got first place. Now, those of you who do not know who Rich is, he actually won the speech contest, and he's going to represent our club going on to the regionals. Now, here's what I'm hoping for. I see when this happened, I sent Monday morning, because I was at a race that weekend. I was doing my 299th 100-mile race. And I found out that Rich had won. So I sent a letter or an email to Toastmasters International. Now, I'm going to come back just a little bit and talk to you about what happened in 2019. In 2019, I gave a speech, and on the clock, I could see the clock at 7:30.46. 7:30.46, that's 7:30. But I was worried that I might get disqualified. So there's an opportunity that if you want to protest, you have to do it within a certain period of time, discreetly. And I said, look, I know it said 7:30.46, but I've actually been timing with some of the other events. And I remember we had someone that was competing in the table topics, and they came in at 2:30 point something, and we qualified them. So I'm just saying, I think I should qualify. Well, Angie Nett was the chief timer, and Angie Nett's been our district director before. And she said, no, it's 7:30, and it went over 7:30. So doesn't qualify. So I lost that because of disqualification. But I sent an email to Toastmasters International. I said, look, there's some little bit of ambiguity here. Is it 7:30.00 or is it 7:30.99? And they made a rule. And you can go look at the contest rules. It says any contest, that 30-second grace period goes to 30.99 from this point on. Now, of course, I lost, but I think I did something good for the next guy that comes up and is within that margin of a second that otherwise would be disqualified. So I had that experience with Toastmasters International. I sent them an email. I said, hey, this is what I think should happen. And they said, sure, you make a good point. We're going to change that rule. So I sent them an email Monday morning, just this past Monday. And I said, look, it's not fair that Rich, every time I compete against him, he beats me. So I want you guys to make sure he cannot compete again. And they sent me a letter right back. Ed, you are one of our very respected, accredited speakers. And sure enough, we're going to disqualify Rich. Now, here's all he has to do. He just has to get through the regionals and then go to the semifinals and get through that and then get up on the big stage. And if he can win the contest, we're banning him for life from ever competing again. Now, if you know the contest rules, no, they're not making a special exception for me against Rich. It is actually a rule. Once you win the international speech contest, you can never, ever compete again. And that's a good rule, because otherwise there could be a speaker who wins it year after year after year. So I want Rich to win. I really want to see him go all the way, because you know what that means if he wins? I don't have to keep beating against him again. So I've got a decent chance. Now, I've continued to run and walk and talk, and my experience with Toastmasters, each time I've done a contest, I've learned something. I've had what I call the positive coincidences or the happy accidents. Like, look at my conversation with Margaret Hope. Would that have happened if I'd have actually won the contest? Don't think so. I'd have been basking in all the praise, people saying, hey, you won the contest, you're going on to the district. But because I had an opportunity and she was standing alone, and like, why not? I'll talk to her. I'll find out about this accredited speaker. And that gave me that opportunity. Sometimes these things happen. Something bad happens. Maybe we think it's bad, but in the long run, it might be good. When I had my injury with my tibia and was in the boot, I thought, well, this is not good. But I ended up doing the marathon with my daughter and decided, well, why not try to do 100 miles? And I walked the 100 miles. It changed my attitude about running and walking. And I decided that maybe walking is not so bad. And I continued to do the 100-mile races. And I got to a point 4 years ago where I was about to run my 200th 100-mile race. And a friend of mine, Andy Noyes, he said, Ed, I got a plan. You should go out and run on Wednesday, run the Born to Run race, 100 miles there. And then over the weekend, there's 200-mile races you can do in Las Vegas. Now, if you go do this race, it's in Los Olivos, and then I live in Bakersfield, come where I live and get a night's sleep, and then I'll take you to Las Vegas. And you can get number 198, 199, number 200. And so I did that. I got my 200th 100-mile race. Oh, it's the second person in the world to have 200 100-mile races. There's one person from Great Britain who had a few over that. Andy was an amazing guy. Andy and I would do a lot of races together. Many of the races that Andy and I would do together, Andy was a walker, didn't look much like a runner, a little bit larger, but he was a great walker. And he was my secret weapon. If I did a multi-day race during the night when most people would need to go get some sleep, I could go out and walk with Andy, and he'd keep me going for hours, racking up the miles. Many of the races that I won was because of Andy. Got a picture of Andy. And here it is. This is my buddy Andy. Now, after I had ran my 200 100-mile race, and Andy knew that I had some big goals. I wanted to eventually have the most 100-mile races in the world. I wanted to eventually have the most 100-mile wins in the world, the most 100-mile seconds, the most 100-mile thirds. I like to win. And so Andy was with me in that goal. He was encouraging me throughout my journey. A week after I had ran my 200 100-mile race, it was Andy's 58th birthday, May 2nd. 2 days later, May 4th, Andy's wife woke up and Andy did not. It was a shock to all of us who knew Andy, a great guy, left us way too soon, and a great friend to me. I reached out to his wife a few weeks after I knew her, and she knew how close Andy and I were. And I said, Blanca, I'd really love to honor Andy. And Andy always wore these iconic shirts. I was the gesture. Andy always had these shirts. He had a yellow one, a blue one, a green one. They were from REI. They had this particular pattern, and that's the shirts that Andy always wore. So I asked his wife, I said, would it be okay if I could get one of Andy's shirts I could wear in my races? She said, Ed, we'd be honored. And she sent me 3 of these shirts. Now, this shirt is actually the very shirt Andy's wearing in that picture. I also have a green one. I have a blue one. Since then, every single 100-mile race I ran in an Andy shirt. Now, a week from now, this very moment, I'll be back at that race called Born to Run. It's going to be my 300th 100-mile race. It'll be 100 100-mile race finishes I've had in Andy's shirt. I'll be the first person to complete 300 100-mile races. And when I'm doing a 100-mile race, you heard Bond earlier talk about how it's not uncommon that you're in a race and that you might start to think, why am I doing this? Well, Bond, that doesn't happen to guys that run ultra. No, it does actually. It happens quite often. And quite often I am in a race and I'm thinking, why am I doing this? I'm not having any fun. My stomach's giving me issues, or maybe I've got blistered feet, or I'm getting cramps. There's all kinds of things that happen in a race, especially in a 100-mile race. But when I'm in that race and I'm having a difficult time, you know who I think about? I think about Andy. Andy's not here. Andy can't do these 100-mile races. Now, Andy never got the chance to see me move up into first place with the most 100-mile races in a lifetime. The most 100-mile wins, the most 100-mile seconds, the most 100-mile thirds. All of those happened since Andy passed. But every race I do, Andy comes with me. So what am I going to do after I do 300 100-mile races? I'm going to go for number 400. This is going to take me a few years. Uh-oh. My wife just said, no, that can't be. She thought 300 was going to be it. I was going to hang up this year's. No, I'll only do 1 or 2 a month. I won't do, by the way, last year I did 56 in 1 year and broke the world record for most 100-mile races in a year. So why do I keep doing that? Well, because I enjoy it and because I like the challenge. And why do I keep entering the contest in Toastmasters? Well, because I like the challenge, I like the fun, I like the opportunity to compete with other people. And those of you who have been in coaching positions, you know there's something that we don't like when we hear someone that we're coaching. We don't like it when they say, I'll try. Because to us it means, well, really? If you're just going to try, then you're not really putting forth a full effort. And I used to think that. In fact, if you remember what Yoda said to young Skywalker, no, I'm going to totally butcher his voice, but I'll do my best. Do or do not. There is no try. But I believed in that for a long time until I started competing at Toastmasters, because there is a try. There's no guarantee when you compete that you're going to win. You're getting judged against other people who are also trying to win. So I do believe that trying can be enough. And so how many times will I try to win the Toastmaster speech contest? Well, let's see. We've all heard this. If at first you don't succeed, try again. And I tried in 2016 and, I didn't win, didn't move on. And so I tried again in 2017 and didn't move on. And then I tried again in 2018 and 2019 and 2020 and 2021 and 2022 and 2023 and 2024 and 2025. Now, look, I ran out. I can't compete anymore unless I just start adding more to that. How many times am I going to try in the speech contest for Toastmasters International? I'm going to keep trying until they do what? Till they say, you're out of here. You can't compete ever again. I encourage you to try. You are rock stars. You have potential to do amazing things. As Bond had said, write a book. Whatever your goal might be, attempt it. Now, I've learned that there are some steps to accomplishing a goal. And if you want to be a rock star, here they are. You need to see it, see that goal. You need to team it. That means pick people who are going to be around to support you. You need to act on it. No matter how much you see it and how much of a good team you have to support you, it's going to take you acting on it. In fact, not just acting on it, but how about some action? And then there's the R's. Well, you're going to need to have a routine. Anyone who's ran knows that you've got to have a routine. There's someone that's on Zoom that I, like Bond, was really impressed with because they had a run streak. 5 years, last I knew, and maybe it's gone much beyond that, Kimberly Smith Austin ran every single day. And I talked about that. I said, man, I don't know how you do that. In fact, I remember there was an event that we went to. It was a speaking event, and we didn't get back into Murrieta until I think it was 9 or 10 at night. And Kimberly said, gotta go out and do my 4 miles. I'm like, Kimberly, are you serious? She said, yep, can't break the streak. So I don't know if she's still doing the streak, but she got me to doing a streak. And I've got a streak now that's almost 1,000 days. Every day, I don't do 4, I do a 5K, which is 3.1 miles. And if I've just raced the day before, then I'll walk it because walking is a good thing. So routine, you need to have a routine. Review what you're doing and revise if you need to. And then rinse and repeat. If you want to get to a major goal, you've got to just keep at it over and over. Rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. Review it, revise, and then also reward yourself. a little bit. If you can keep doing those, I think just about every goal you can come up with, you'll eventually get to it. Now, if you go out and look up to the night sky, you don't see a star, you see stars. So the very last step, obviously you don't have to do this, but I encourage you to do it. And that is share it with others. Pass it on, help them accomplish their goal. Now, I got a package in the mail, well, from Amazon, and it is from England. You know what's in England, don't you? Guinness World Record. I'm gonna open it. I think I know what's in here. Don't need that or that. It's this certificate right here. It's from Guinness. It's a world record certificate, but it's not my name on it. This is actually a friend of mine that I coach, Desi, and she was just at the London Marathon just 10 days ago. And she is a world record holder because that race had 56,000 finishers and Desi was one of them. So although I do not have a Guinness World Record, one of my coaching students does, and I'm proud of her, and I'm happy to live vicariously through her. You may never get a Guinness World Record. It doesn't matter. What really matters is having a goal and going for it, giving it your all, and enjoying the experiences that come along, and then sharing it with others. If you do that, I think that might be a fulfilling life. Back to you, Tom.